Hi, everybody, and welcome to a new edition of Newsmakers. I'm Jerry Roberts. It is Friday, March 21st, and we are joined by Gwyn Lurie, editor-in-chief of the Montecito Journal, and Josh Molina, man of many hats, and host of the Joe Rogan-like podcast, Santa Barbara Talks. And we're expecting Callie Fausey to parachute in from the dentist at any moment. Gwyn, let's start with you. You had an interesting interview with Roy Lee, the new supervisor for the first district, of which you are the hometown paper over there. And it was interesting because it hadn't occurred to me. I mean, since he came in office, it's just been one thing after another. We had of course, the vote about pay raises that we talked about, and then the vote on the pipeline, Sable, and then this week, pot. What was your sense of how the new supervisor is holding up?
My sense is that he's doing great. I mean, it's like they're trying to match Donald Trump with their executive, first 100-day orders, just boom, 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 boom. Um, but yeah, I mean, he certainly has had a number of like interesting tests and I think he feels very good about it. He's certainly loving his job. The pay raise one I thought was really interesting because his attitude was, I don't want to vote on
His
this.
attitude was, "I'm taking a duck on that." That was
Well, honestly, as the city council person, as he said in the interview, as a city council person in Carp, he never voted for that. I don't think he's ever comfortable voting for pay raises for
well.
um,
So why didn't he vote against it? Is my question. If he wasn't,
because I think sitting in the room, it was so clear that the majority of the public comments that came in, both written and verbally in the room, were in favor of it and felt that they should be. And I was certainly watching it, and that's the sense I got. I mean, there were a couple of people, and more than a couple of, a few people who had issues with them voting on it for themselves. And then, of course, there was Andy Caldwell, who was accusing them of working, what was it, 3 days a month or something like that. I mean, it was so wrong and misleading and I think the really credible comments that he came, and I think he felt people were supportive of it. And look, he knows already how many hours he works, so
so you felt like that wasn't just a political calculation on his part, that there was actually something principled
yeah,
about
I think so. I do, I really do. And then the Sable pipeline thing, he was 100% felt that that is not something that should happen. And I think, he felt very comfortable with his vote on that. And this cannabis thing, we hadn't talked about this week because the interview happened before it, of course, but they've been working on this, he and Laura. It was Laura's idea actually to have a local meeting in Carp for the citizens to weigh in, but she respectfully went to Roy to get his blessing since it's in his district, and he felt great about it. And so he jumped right in there with her, and they received a couple dozen letters from on the Carp City Council actually urging them to go ahead and approve this legislation to enforce scrubbers um, uh, on the part of cannabis growers. And I think for the first time, people in that community have felt heard on this issue. It
yeah,
seems
yeah,
freeing.
yeah. Well, I mean, the pot thing is huge, and I don't want to get into the weeds, so to speak, about it,
Uh,
but I mean, the policy is obviously 180 degrees where it was with DOS. But I just wondered from your perspective, because you talk to a lot of people just about the politics. I mean, what the difference in style between DOS and Roy, not to mention the huge differences in policy, obviously, between them. How are people reacting to that?
I think people are cautiously optimistic,
Yeah,
is
yeah,
what I think. I mean, I, I don't know. For me, like, and this is just an observation from where I sit, like, I think gone are the days where people first and foremost appreciate a slick politician. I don't know that they ever appreciated slick, but a practiced politician, and I think Roy has a genuine interest in understanding how people feel. I think he comes to it with a strong moral center, whatever you think of his morals. And I think he views things through that lens. And I think people appreciate that. I mean, it remains to be seen. I'm sure he's going to find himself in hot water. Not everything's going to be so.
Well, Giordano's up. Your man Giordano's already turned on him. So,
I don't quite understand that. I need to talk to Jeff about.
yeah,
I don't quite understand that. Do you?
Josh, you've done a lot of reporting on the Hot Springs Trail issue, which sort of pits homeowners against tourists or whatever. But what would you think about this kind of quasi compromise that Roy was in the middle of? He talked go into you a lot about that in your interview as well.
Well, what compromise are we are we
The
talking?
red flag thing where there's
Oh,
different, it's not open or closed. It's, there's gradations and different steps in between.
well, I mean, I think it goes to what Gwyn said is that people are cautiously optimistic and they trust his intentions. And I don't think anyone thinks yet that Roy is doing something and then having to wonder in the back of the head, what is the real reason why Roy is doing it? And so, with the red flag warnings and funding additional enforcement during those days, and I know some people want a much more extreme response to all of the people who are going up there and hiking and drinking and partying. I think that it is a fine line between shutting it down and allowing people to have access to it. It's a popular trail, and it's one of the trails I know you can actually like find. Sometimes, especially with Mountain Drive closed in Montecito, part of it, well, it's difficult to find some of those trails these days. So it is popular for locals too. So I think that yeah, he's doing that's how he works. I think with the going back to the pay raises, he who wants to be on the side of Andy Caldwell in that moment. So he could have voted no, but that no vote would have been co-opted for the rest of his career, and I think he feels like probably like a lot of
You
journalists do.
mean in the sense that his colleagues would have been mad at him, or that
Well, I
the
mean,
right
I just
wing?
think if you find yourself erring on the side of Andy Caldwell, you probably have to ask yourself if you're a politician, is this the side I want to be on? Because in that moment, right? I mean, this was not a normal, the pay raise thing was not a Andy's freaking out about some liberal thing the board is doing. They were seriously angry at him for what they called misleading facts or even lies,
Disinformation.
And
Yeah.
so it was far beyond what they're used to with Andy, which is an extreme point of view. And so I think abstaining is I'm not going against my colleagues here and siding with Andy. I instead and he just started, so he can't testify to the amount of work, so he can't support it either. So I think that's how he is. As a journalist who meets him, there's a lot to be said for a firm handshake that looks you in the eye, that asks follow-up questions about you, your day, what are you doing next, how's your family? And I can imagine if he's doing that with me, he's doing that with most of the people he's talking to. And you just didn't get that before. You get, oh, and by the way, can you write about this thing, or can about this person? Like,
That's
there's always
weird
an
because
ask.
Doss always asked me about my family.
Who
Yeah.
did?
Kidding. I was joking.
Well,
Oh, okay.
there was always an ask from Doss, a
Yeah. Well,
request
but
that
enough
was.
about my bill. What do you think of me? Yeah.
And Roy just seems like a genuine dude. I mean, we'll find out, of course, in the next 4 years, but he just seems like a guy you can trust.
I think he
The
is
only
a
thing
genuine
I do
dude.
have, I'm sorry, just real quick, Gwen. I do want to say, Roy's replacing Das is huge. I mean, but it's one piece of what's changed over there. I think that Laura's chairpersonship of it has been very effective. I mean, they have had all these big issues, and she's taken them on, and they boom, 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 one after the other, and they've dealt with them. But it's been a pretty civil procedure.
I agree.
Taking
I
it
really
around.
agree with you, Jerry. I think, you know, Laura's, someone I know pretty well, and I have always thought she was a good person, and I always knew she was committed to public service. But even like I've been very pleasantly surprised by how tough she's been in certain moments, like clear tough, and not taken the easy path and really stood up to something that felt wrong to her. Like I mean, not that I doubted she would do that, but I think she's really coming into her own, and I think this is allowing her to have a clearer voice politically.
Yeah. And
I really do.
the fact that she worked with Bob Nelson, a conservative guy, sort of quietly and behind the scenes and in a sustained way to get to yes on the pot stuff, where you get a 5-0 vote. I mean, who would have thought? Who would have seen that come? It was always 5-0 the other way. Thanks, Joan, for
To,
bending.
to be fair, to be fair, the politics behind that is Bob Nelson is gearing up to run for a larger office, so he sees some benefit to
What's he
being
running for?
perceived by liberals as a moderate.
What's he running for? There you go. There's the
Well, he might run for
That's a
assembly.
good.
He might run for assembly. Depends on how the chairs shuffle with, whatever
yeah,
Monique.
but even before that, he just sort of strikes me as a pretty pragmatic guy. He's sort of center right and stuff, but he's not dogmatic about it. He's not ideological about it.
Well, he did go to D.C. for Trump's inauguration, and he
So
is
did so did Salute.
well.
Don't get me started on that.
Salute works there. But I will just say this, Jerry, is that
He didn't have to go to the inauguration.
Bob does a great job of. He's doing a great job right now portraying him exactly the way you framed him, and over time, we'll probably see a little bit different. But let me just say one thing about Laura is when Laura called out Andy Caldwell, and she looked at him and said, this is a paraphrase, but I don't really appreciate being told how much I work by a man as a mom. And she took off her glasses and looked him in the eye. That was a very incredible moment because so often in public people play nice and then they grumble behind the scenes. But I think every now and then you have to, if you're in that role, and she's a strong woman and she's always going to be having that judgment on her by people like Andy, and so call them on it right there. Just do it, and then you will see them get small. Andy didn't say anything, right? He didn't say anything about it, and if you're in the room when that happens, that's incredible. And she does bring a certain amount of respect and an air of seriousness. Nothing against Steve Lavanino, who everybody loves, but he's like a comic. He's a joke. He's funny. He makes jokes about every moment, and which is great. It's fine, right? Makes the meeting feel fun. But sometimes it could also make it feel less serious. And Laura, like you're not going to really get away with anything there. She's on it, and I think she learned from, she's been on school board. She's learned how to deal with a lot of these little issues, public backlashes. So I agree with Gwyn there that's also an incredible change. And between those two, we're seeing a huge shift on the board in the tone.
Well,
Yeah.
the other, just one last word on Bob Nelson too, and where he is politically and having gone to the Trump. He does sort of a lot of his views and his perspective on thing is faith-based. He's a very faith-based. I think that informs a lot of his thinking and a lot of the way he approaches things. And so, I mean, he may be center right, but he's probably pretty aligned with some of the reasons Trump is where he is right now.
Well, nothing wrong with faith-based.
No, not at all. But I think he,
Particularly if
that
you,
he,
pay
I think
attention.
Gwen is using faith-based for code for a certain kind of viewpoint
Well,
on certain
Well,
issues.
is he? I mean, I don't know
he
if he's
thanked first and foremost Jesus Christ,
right, which
God for his, and that was, I thought very telling about who he is as a human and how he thinks about things. So, and there's no judgment on that whatsoever. I'm just, sort of trying to place him somewhere on the political spectrum. Yeah.
yeah, I don't, I mean, I think if you read the Old Testament and the Gospels, I think there's an underlying sensibility that we're supposed to help society's victims and so on. And
Yeah, for
where
sure.
we get away from that with Christian evangelical white nationalists
Right,
is
that is true. And I think that's been twisted, obviously, in this moment by Trump and his,
yes. Yeah.
yeah, for sure.
All right, Josh, let me ask you something about a weird story that happened. So you had an exclusive interview with a man named Ghost, uh,
Yeah.
who was wearing a mask, who set up a sting operation. This is an independent vigilante outfit with a guy who was supposedly trying to meet an underage boy for sex. If I got that right?
Yeah. Although he doesn't want to be called a vigilante. He wants to be called an activist.
I'll bet he doesn't. My question, did the guy do anything? He was arrested, right? And
No,
released. Did
no,
he
he didn't.
commit a crime? I don't.
Well, I think that he was arrested, and so what happened is this group CC unit, and the founder is Ghost, and CC stands for creep catching. They're based out of San Diego. He's a guy in his mid-20s, and what they do is they go on apps where adults meet each other for. He didn't tell me the actual app, but where they meet up for dating, I guess, and they pose as underage people, and then they have communication with adults, men who are on these apps who are looking for activity.
This
And
is
so,
like that old TV. Was it NBC, MSNBC? To Catch
yes,
a Predator?
he told me he grew up watching To Catch a Predator with the guy, I forget his name,
Yeah.
Hansen. And so he was inspired by this. And when he turned 19, he wondered, are there creeps in my community? And so he went online. And so now he's got this huge YouTube following, his social media following. And what he does is travels around California mostly, but also parts of the country where he goes on these apps, poses, and then gets in a exchange. And the arrangement is to meet him. They think he's a minor in some location for a hookup for sex, right? And so they pose as underage minors, and then in this case this guy they arranged to meet in Goleta at the Goleta Target, and they, according to the chat transcripts, it's they do this thing where they say, "Are you fine with me being younger?" And they get the guy on the record saying, no, yes, and they say the age. He said he was 15, and the guy says, "Okay." It's actually reading the chat transcripts, as he sent me about 20 or so, is actually, it's pretty sickening because you watch the whole conversation like evolve, and the guy thinks he's a kid or thinks he's a minor, and then they just gets advances, and there's explicit graphic discussion there about acts and activities. And he only sent me about 20. There were more than 100 messages sent. And so anyway, they met at the Target. They called the sheriff's office ahead of time, and they say, we're going to approach this person with our cameras. We have what we believe to be evidence. They have these transcripts. And if you want to come make an arrest, please do. Now, not all law enforcement will do that, because law enforcement, they want to know, they do their own investigation. In this case, they showed up, the sheriff's deputies. And according to Raquel Zick, who is the PIO, she said that they took it, the chats, they took the information, the transcripts, and the evidence they had. And they also, on scene, did their own investigation by talking to the guy. and they ended up arresting him. And so for this organization, this is
And ruining, and in the process, ruining his life.
yes. Well, I mean, I don't know. I mean, so he's arrested and he's out now, by the way. He posted bail. It was a $75,000
What's he
bail.
charged with?
Um, the
Improper internet
I,
writing?
no, I think it was luring a minor, for lewd
There
acts.
was no minor, correct?
There is no minor. This guy is
It
25.
was
But
intent to, I'm sure.
you're not, you're not allowed to lure a minor to a place with the intent of having sex. That's against the law. So whether you actually do something or not, as I understand it, as the sheriff's office said, that is a crime. Now, the DA is looking at the body of evidence and they will decide, whether they're going to file charges or not. But this guy, the CC unit, if you go on his YouTube, has tons of video. So what he does, Jerry, is they bring a cell phones. There's a team, and they video this guy who is all these guys, and they're just scared. They're terrified. They have no idea what's going to happen, and there's a belief like if you confess the crime, we won't go any further. If you admit you're wrong, if you seek therapy, so there's this pressure that you're seeing, and they do it, because they're like, I don't want anyone to find out, even though everything's on camera. And then at the end, in this case, the sheriff's office, they show up, and they make the arrest. And so, I talked to this guy. We did an interview, Ghost, and his attitude is law enforcement is reactive. So they wait until there's a victim and then they go in and make an arrest. And his attitude is we're proactive. We want to stop it before there is a victim. And, as the question, I said, well, how do you know they've done this before? And they're like, well, they always say it's the first time, and Ghost does not believe that. And so, in his mind, he's saving a child from something happening by being aggressive. And I mean, it is, if you watch this stuff, I asked him this question too. I said, you're dealing with people who are allegedly dangerous. And you're just 25-year-old going up to them. How do you know they're not going to freak out on you or shoot you or stab you if you're confronting them? And he said, he's a religious person and God is on his side, and if he's doing the right thing, he thinks God is protecting him, kind of thing. So there's a whole they're dropping, as he says, the video of this thing today on his YouTube channel, so everyone can watch it. But he sent screen grabs and images and all of that to me, and also they have a website full of all of these similar kind of catches. And so that's what happened, and they did make the arrest. Now, if they did, I believe that other groups, they have been in Santa Barbara, according to Raquel Zick, stings like this have happened, and there hasn't been an arrest. This time there was an arrest. And so
yeah,
I wish he would do some of that work on attempts at child trafficking, because that's so much more prevalent on the Central Coast than people think. I wonder, Josh, you said it was disgusting to read the transcripts, but don't you find it also surprising that people will commit that stuff to print? I mean, we all know now not to put anything in writing because anyone could see it. So it just seems like really risky.
Yeah, I mean, it is like, with our clear heads, you're looking at this and you're like, how stupid are these people, right? But I mean, you can imagine if you're in that space, they're probably they're not thinking normally, right? So, but yeah, to put all of that, and you can see the guy in the chat transcript saying, I'm nervous. Like you can see the evolution of the guy's emotion, and it's sort of like,
yeah. I don't want to go all ACLU on this, but. And, this is obviously is a horrible crime when committed. But I am concerned about entrapment and the First Amendment and things that are going on. There's a lot of guys being arrested and sent to prison in Venezuela because they have a tattoo, because Trump has, running vigilante justice with ICE. And there's a lot of other people who are lives are being ruined because of vigilantism. I mean, this just bothers me.
Well, I will say
And
this
also,
guy.
I mean, I in my own personal experience with having been smeared by this process of stuff, it's just it troubles me. And I'm not defending this guy, or I'm not saying what he did was right, but what did he do? He wrote some stuff on the internet that we found offensive. So is that going to be the new standard now?
Well, for the record, this guy did start this site, I think, in 2019 or something like that. Of course, that was still when Trump was president, but it wasn't like yesterday he started the
No,
site.
I know. I'm just saying that there's the First Amendment, people's rights, people's individual rights. It's
I think
all
I think that according to
this is not the case I want to. This is not the hill I want to die on.
no, you're exactly right. It is controversial. It's like, is this fair to these people? Because in watching some of those YouTube videos, some of those people come across as having a mental illness, right? Like beyond obviously just people saying you're obviously mentally ill if you want to do this. It seemed like some of them are being taken advantage of. But it's one thing to communicate, right? It's one thing, but the crime is to show up for it. And so that's the distinction that they're making here, is that if this guy had communicated on this app, and even if it was disgusting, and then decided not to do that, not to show up, I don't think that's a crime. But when you show up and you plan to meet, you're essentially saying, you're willing to follow through. And I think that's the distinction. But that being said, the
Well,
DA
who's
is
the
going to
victim?
the DA is going to have to research this and decide exactly that, right?
Who's
Is
the
it a
victim?
crime? What?
Who's the victim?
Yeah, I mean that's the question. The guy's posing as
Ghost the victim? I don't know. All right. Speaking of Trump, Gwen, your entrepreneurial skills are perhaps best embodied by the giving list, which you've developed there at the Montecito Journal. And given what's happening with the attacks on the government, the dismantling of the government, I know there's a lot of nonprofits who have been affected and are being affected, and that you have been in the process of contacting a number of them. What are you hearing and what's going on?
Is this terribly loud? Do you hear that?
Yeah.
Okay, talk to Josh for one more second. I'm just going to ask him to please move. He's right outside my window.
Gary, can you believe Cooper Kupp is no longer with the Rams? I can't believe that.
These city hall payouts. We talked about the librarian last week, but the public works guy got him. He made bank too on the way out the door. What is that all about? Why are they?
So I got the
all have real employees.
Yeah, I got this. I don't know if you want to go back to Gwyn here. We can talk about that later. But yeah, I got the settlement agreements, and Carpinteria got $500,000. Some of that was for her attorney, but then also some payout for lost pay. And then she got almost a year of salary. And the public works director, Cliff Maurer, got his whole salary for a year ahead of time. And these are at-will employees. And I have to say, we'll probably transition back to Gwyn in a second. Government, city administration, Kelly McAdoo, the city council, you may think that this is not a big deal. It's what we have to do, move on. When this kind of stuff happens, the morale of the city staff, the workers, the employees, it just totally wrecks them. And ultimately, they lose respect for the administration.
Well, and we just voted for this tax increase. Okay, we got to have this tax increase. So what? So we can pay all these people that are getting fired? They're all at will employees. I'm struggling with why it is they.
Well, obviously they have some kind of information that they're afraid would come out in a lawsuit. Why else would you settle with somebody if they're an at-will employee? They're afraid, oh, you're going to file a lawsuit and there's going to be all this personnel matter coming out, and it's better just to pay you off. And
What
I
was the
think
total? What was the total on those two, Josh?
it was about $850,000. And, and
850,000.
and I got a couple emails. If you add up the lifetime pension benefits to both of these, it's well over $1 million, but I didn't add all of that future stuff. I just added what was given right now. So it's a tough thing, and we don't know. The other part of it is the city council, the mayor. I'm well sourced over there, but they're basically saying we can't say anything, and
Well,
there's
and
no
just, I
public
mean,
narrative or explanation at all.
just in the last couple of years, what did Rob Dayton? What did he get? How much did he get?
I know we should go pull all of the settlement
And
agreements for everyone who's
the
left.
city attorney, how much did he get? I mean, you add all these up, there's millions of dollars.
I think Ariel, well, I reported this, and Newshawk was fired. He was terminated, so they do have precedent for terminating someone, and there was a lot of stuff related to that investigation.
The budget director was another one.
Um,
Uh,
no, he got a nice press release about a retirement. Yeah, he retired. So
yeah, you should go back and look and see how much they got. It'd be interesting.
yeah.
So, Gwyn, thank you for quieting the leaf blower. That was exciting. So yeah, we were talking about nonprofits and how they're being affected by Trump's vigilante government. What are you hearing?
They're certainly being affected. They're being affected a lot of different ways. By the way, just in terms of the tax dollars you were just talking about in terms of terminations, would you rather pay for tax dollars for terminations or tax dollars for a White House ballroom? Just wondering what you'd prefer. Okay, anyway, you could think about that. So,
Right.
yeah, I mean, so over the last 5 years between the Giving List City books here in Santa Barbara, the Bay Area, Los Angeles, but also our national book, the Giving List Women, we are in pretty close contact or have with hundreds of nonprofits and leaders. And so we actually sent out a national survey, a survey with 200 of our partners across, actually globally, to find out what the impact has been financially, existentially, and just from like spiritually, because there's a lot of fear out there, and a lot of anticipatory compliance on the part of donors
Mm-hmm.
who are pulling back, from supporting anything that might be considered DEI related, right? So it could be
Or
women, it could be
immigrant
BIPOC leaders,
immigrant rights related too.
anything like that. So it's really quite, it's had a real chilling effect on this. I think the worst, and we're about to do a local survey actually that the Montecito Journal is going to do with just Santa Barbara organizations. We're going to do it in partnership with Natalie Orfila and Orfila Foundation, Natalie Orfila Foundation. And, put out there really to the questions that we hope will help us and frankly donors understand where the needs are right now. But it's not just USAID. USAID has impacted a lot of nonprofits, particularly global NGOs like Mercy Corps, for example, lost $130 million. Like there's a lot of loss out there that is causing these organizations to rethink their financial lifelines, which, in the long run will be a healthy thing, but in the short run is devastating. There was no lead up to this. There was no process. It was just boom. And so the amount of development that is being halted internationally and support of the most vulnerable communities is
Well, and
profound.
the amount of people that are going to die
It's profound.
to
It
find a
is
point on it.
absolutely, absolutely. So there's real impact, real negative impact. But there's also the fear factor, that has people really worried about, how they are presenting their work. Some people are like rethinking how they're even calling things, their DEI, that word is being removed from everything. It's like anything that reeks of supporting one group of people versus everybody, it's all being again, it's like anticipatory compliance. And
Well, yeah,
it's
everything that they don't like, that white men don't like, it becomes woke or DEI. I mean, it's just this slur that they put on everything, which is just absurd, and is again part of repealing the 20th century.
well, and we were talking before this, before we went, started this show about Jackie Robinson, his photo, his army career being wiped from the military websites,
Yeah, because what Jackie Robinson's known for is not breaking the color barrier. It's really sacrifice bunts. I
Right,
mean, I
exact.
mean,
I mean, it's just insane. This decorated um, black soldier, a vet from the Vietnam War. That page has been pulled down, and if you go to it, it says DEI medal. I mean, it is so
sickening.
twisted and sickening. I mean, this
I
these
mean, once
people
a year.
saved their lives because so many white middle class and upper middle class kids got out of it because of bone spurs or flat feet or whatever it is. It's like it really is a very dark.
Once a year, every team in Major League Baseball, every player wears Jackie Robinson's number to honor Jackie Robinson. And the reason they honor Jackie Robinson is because he was the first black player. And that's not woke, it's an historic fact. And it's not because he was a great base stealer that everybody is wearing number 47. It's because of that.
Was Kobe
And to try
Bryant
to
a
erase
DEI
that
hire?
history, huh?
Was Kobe Bryant a DEI hire?
Yeah, another DEI hire.
And I mean, it's like the whole thing is so sickening. And the thing that amazes me about this all, well, actually, just back to your original question. So we were on the phone with a woman named Zakiya Thomas, who heads the ERA coalition in the United States, and her team, and they were saying, like, they now, when they're in the Capitol lobbying, they get in an elevator, and the men in the elevator don't even make eye contact with them. Like it used to be that they would say hello, whatever. It's like they don't exist, and they were about to receive a $90,000 grant from a individual donor, and they pulled it back, saying they just need to keep their head down at the moment, like they can't. So this is pervasive and and destructive and really sad, really depressing. And the other interesting thing to me is that the Democratic Party, which, I've been a card-carrying member for my entire voting life, but actually, Jeff Green just sent me this very funny um, onion, two onion headlines. One is DNC announces plans to learn nothing from this. That was hilarious. And the other one was Democratic leaders stand real still in hopes no one notices them.
Yeah,
It's
thank you,
just,
salute Corbo.
I mean, it's just unbelievable. And I think I was also listening to a woman, who Sarah Longwell is. She owns the Bulwark and she has her.
The
I was
publisher,
listening to
yeah.
her speak, and she said something like, she said, the amazing thing is the Democratic Party's brave response to this is to find the whitest, straightest, malest candidates to run for.
Yeah,
It's like, it's just unbelievable that everyone is allowing this to shape what they know is right.
yeah.
And it's
All right.
anyway.
All right, just one more thing. Josh, you had a piece before we go, not Trump related, fortunately, but it was on the economic forecast, the radius economic forecast, and it seemed, maybe I was reading too much into it, that the big change they think Santa Barbara ought to make is to reopen State Street.
Yeah, this was a room of, I don't know, 300 people, and there were four speakers, and one of the speakers goes up there and says, retail is dying and State Street is dying, even though we're this greatest city in the world. And he says, Randy Rouse, wherever you are, Mayor, you need to reopen State Street. And I think he thought it would just get like a couple laughs, but like the whole audience just like erupted into applause. And yeah, that room, commercial real estate brokers, people who are on the scene, who are having to lease these places out, they are saying that we have a problem. And also, Coast Village Road, Gwyn, is like hot. I mean, it's the most expensive that it's ever been, and people want to be there. They said they want a flagpole in Montecito. It's just there's a cachet, there's a status, and everybody wants to be there. And there's by the way, there's parking, there's cars there. People still want to be there.
Are there a lot of electric bikes on Coast Village Road? Is it a
I mean, I don't notice that. I've never heard that it's an issue, but there is one other issue that came up this week, by the way, that you might want to look into and talk about a little bit, which it came up at the Montecito Association, that this company Flock is pitching to the Montecito community. They made a presentation about having cameras placed everywhere around Montecito that can read license plate readers, basically. So they don't photograph humans, but they will photograph license plates. And they're talking about putting them all over Montecito so that in the case of theft, robberies, anything that could happen, because, there's been a huge uptick in these, these South American gangs in Carp now, robberies and whatnot. So this is an attempt to really catch some of these. It will connect to these cameras, apparently will connect to some national registry hot list of cars that are on the radar from law enforcement.
That sounds horrific.
Well, they don't get people, they get license plates. So it is a little Orwellian for sure.
A little.
But it's being talked about, so I just wanted to throw it out there.
All right. Well, Gwyn Lurie, Josh Molina, thanks for talking. I once again have convinced me that I'm really glad I'm old, because I am just agog at what is going on in our civilization. But open State Street, at least it's something we can do. All right, guys. Gwyn, Josh, thanks. Thanks for watching, everyone. We'll see you next time on Newsmakers.
Thank you.